We're going to kick the show off with a guy that I said almost 5 years ago when I watched Ring of Honor. I said, this guy is a bright spot in the future of professional wrestling. We've been friends on Facebook for a few years. Welcome aboard, none other than Ring of Honor's Michael Elgin. Michael, how are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Standard thing I always like to do, Michael, is, there's a point where usually when we're kids or we're young men, something in wrestling gets our attention, and then we make a decision that we want to pursue it, and then we go through training. And if I could get you to tell us what that point was, where you decided you wanted to do it, what turned you on the first time to it, and where you trained, and how was your training?
Okay, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment I wanted to be a wrestler, and I say that because I was really, really young. There's pictures of me at my first Christmas, so I would have been a few weeks old, and my cousins kind of having me around a bunch of wrestling toys, and they were a lot older than me, so they handed me down a bunch of wrestling stuff, and that was kind of where it all came from. And then my first vivid memory of wrestling was a live show in my hometown. Would have been 89, so I would have been, maybe 4 years old, and it was Dusty Rhodes against Big Boss Man in a big blue steel cage, and that was those are the earliest memories, and I can't remember ever wanting to do something else. The cute thing of a kindergarten teacher when your first day of school, what do you want to be when you grow up? And everybody's saying princess or, fireman or whatever. And I was saying pro wrestler from such a young age. So that was really where it all started. And then I just never grew out of it. Around, 12, me and my buddy started backyard wrestling, of course, like most kids at that time did, because there wasn't so many warnings about don't do this at home. And I remember a kid moved to town. He started backyard wrestling because the first day of school he wore a wrestling shirt, which meant, of course, we're automatically friends. And we went to a wrestling show in Toronto. And while there was flyers being handed out, and it was a 2-week wrestling camp, ages 14 and up. And if I had known better, I would have understood that anywhere who's going to train a 14-year-old is probably not the best place. But I didn't know any better, so I went there for the 2-week camp. And I had my first wrestling match after that 2-week camp. Obviously, it wasn't like a big show where people bought a bunch of tickets, but it was like a family friend thing. So technically, I had my first match after 2 weeks of training. And I trained there for about a year and a half. And then I found out there was better schools in the area, and they would take me at 16. So when I turned 16, I went to Squared Circle, which was owned by a guy named Rob Flego, but I wouldn't call him my trainer. I wouldn't really call him a trainer since I'd been there, at least. He really never got in the ring. So I was trained by Tyson Dukes and Ashley Six. And that's really where it all started, was at Squared Circle with them. And Ashley Six actually still owns a wrestling school in Toronto with another guy named Chris Chambers. So if anybody's in Toronto listening to this and looking for a school, check them out.
Beautiful, man. That's fantastic. Now, tell me a little bit about the early days, the working, the independents, and I'm sure you came down and worked some in the States too. How long were you out there, and what were your experiences? I know, I've spent, I hate to say it, Michael, but I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Makes me feel really old. So, but I've seen the changes, but you started a while ago, and what was it like working the indies and getting to know some of the guys?
It was great. I actually started my career, technically my real career, in the States. As I said, I had matches those first 2 years from 14 to 16, but I don't really count them as part of my actual wrestling career, just because they were such low key shows. I hadn't really found a persona or a name or anything that was really concrete for myself. I went back and forth between what gear I was wearing and my wrestling names and all this kind of stuff, and kind of just imitated wrestlers I had seen, which we all kind of do when we start because we're new, but more so then. So when I was 16, Ontario had an athletic commission, which meant you had to be 18 to perform in Ontario, and I was only 16. So I traveled a lot to Montreal, Ohio, Detroit area, and a couple other Indiana and close, kind of semi-close states to Canada. So it was easy to travel to. And one of the first people I met was actually Truth Martini, which is funny because he ended up being my manager when I first came to Ring of Honor. So
right.
The very first show I did was for Truth in Hamtramck, Michigan. And I was traveling with 3 guys, and it was a 4-way match for my first match against those 4 Truth Martini. So I met a lot of people that I would, see around in my career, of course. I think that's kind of just how wrestling goes for everybody, You go places, and then you see the people who you can tell who are really talented and really want it, and those are the guys you see throughout your career. And the ones that didn't want to travel and the ones that you only saw in that one location are the ones that you don't see when you start branching out. So I remember specifically, obviously, Truth Martini, Jimmy Jacobs, but at that time he was like an indie guy that was well known at the time. So,
right.
But ran into him. That whole kind of Detroit crew were guys I saw a lot.
Right.
And at that first start, I would say probably age 17, so about a year after I started, Sin, who had the stint in WWE as Kazarni,
right.
He saw that I was willing to travel and saw that I showed up to class all the time and I was always willing to help out. So he gave me a lot of opportunities to ride with him, and we went all over the place, man. Like, we'd go to Detroit, and then I can't even name half the places. Like, we just went all over. We would drive for, a week and a half straight after me telling him I have to be back Monday morning for school, and I get back the following Monday morning for school just because we were going all over the place. But those are the people that really, really helped me out. I would say Ashley Six, Tyson Dukes, Kazarni, and Truth Martini, and that Detroit crew. So you're Josh Abercrombie, later known as Josh Raymond, and then Jimmy Jacobs and such. Those are guys that really helped me out in that first couple of years.
Yeah, and Michael, those are some great names in the Midwest wrestling scene. I've known Truth Martini since he was the Jackal, and he's a great guy. He trained a really good friend of mine, Malice, and he's very, very smart to the business. You know what I mean? If you sit down and talk with him or train with him, the great trainers. And I just wrote a post on Not Traveling yesterday, the day before, on Facebook. And for me, I always traveled all over the place. And one of the things I found that was great about it was that you got to work different guys, and that's what made you better. You don't get better staying an hour from home working the same old guys all the time. You just don't. You have to travel. I always say, this is a traveling business. It's always been a traveling business. Anybody that's been successful in it has traveled in this business, and it's a necessary evil that you have to do. And I know you're married, you got a baby and stuff, but you know that you have to still travel. I mean, that's what makes this thing work. So kudos to you for figuring that out early in your career. Cause, I trained, Joey Mercury is at WWE and Christian York, and those boys traveled all over. Cause I from the get-go, they traveled with me and another guy, Jimmy Cicero. And we tried to instill in them that you need to take shows in different places, because I lived right outside of DC, and so did all these guys. And I would tell them that guys in the Midwest wrestled different than guys in New England area. And guys in New England wrestled different than guys in the Carolinas or in the South. And you really got to get around and find out the different areas of different guys. And that's what makes you excel in the business. So I think that's a very positive thing. And, of course, everybody knows who Jimmy Jacobs is and Truth, and, some of the guys you mentioned, Kazarni. I mean, those are all great guys that know what they're doing. And, I think I've always said, I believe that the actual physical side of wrestling is about 10% of this business. Most of it's upstairs. It's being smart, it's being intelligent, it's understanding psychology, etiquette, and all the other things that go along with it. So, those guys are masters of that stuff. So you really had some good instructors and guys to hang around with. So, that shows what type of wrestler you are, because I've always thought that you were, I said it years ago, and one of the first posts I ever made after I saw you was, there's the bright spot in Ring of Honor, not disrespecting anybody, because I got a ton of friends there, but just saying that, I look for wrestlers to be somewhat of a throwback. And if I look at you, I see an Arn Anderson type wrestler, a throwback wrestler, a straight ahead, big muscular guy that is constantly moving and constantly on the attack. And, I think that's the perfect persona for you. I really do.
I appreciate the kind words very much.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You earned them. I'm going to pass this around a little bit, because I know Sign Guy probably wants to ask you a couple of questions, and I'm typically a ball hog when I get talking to somebody on here. So I'm going I'm, I'm going to pass it off and let the sign guy open up on it with a few with you, and then we'll go over to Zane.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you, Cue Ball.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Elgin, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, last year you looked like you were going to be the face of the company for Ring of Honor. You had the big build-up to the title match. You got the title, but the reign didn't seem to go how a lot of people expected it to go. Once you won the title, is that when things took a different direction, or was there something in the works we don't know about that always had this as a short run for you on top?
I think that it just didn't pan out because it was too long of a wait. It was just, I've expressed this before, and I think fans have expressed it. There was a period where I was on the rise and Kevin Steen was on the rise, and the perfect story ended with us, but instead it was all over the place. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just, it didn't go from Kevin Steen to me, and I think that was where I would have really excelled as champion, and I would have excelled as face of the company. But you can't change that kind of stuff, and I think that with everything that has happened, it's brought me to now, which, with the stuff with New Japan and everything that's coming in 2016, I think I'm in the best point of my career, and I really just look forward to next year. You can't sit back and dwell on anything in the past because you can't change it. That's what happened. There's no going back as much as some people would like to. You just have to focus on the future. And I think that ever since I decided not to dwell on the past is when everything has been skyrocketing for me, So, really I'm just focusing on what's coming forward. And tomorrow, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, so I'm focusing on that. And then as soon as that match is done, I'm focusing on Monday for Wrestle Kingdom. There's
a lot of professional wrestling right now as far as what's available to fans on cable. You have WWE, of course, but you also have Ring of Honor, TNA, Paragon Wrestling, all on national cable outlets. Some of the cable outlets may not be the most widely known channels. Some of the time slots may not be the most favorable. But looking at the landscape, where do you see the health of the industry as a whole as we head into 2016?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? My phone was acting up.
Sure. You have, on the national landscape of things, you have WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, Paragon, all have these national cable deals, Lucha Underground. Some of the networks aren't the highly reachable networks. Some of them, the shows don't have the best time slots. But going into 2016, where do you see the overall health of the industry?
I think that I wouldn't be alone in saying I think we're on the rise again. Wrestling, much like other sports, much like anything really, has our down periods and our up periods. And I really think that wrestling's on a rise all around. The indies are on fire. As you said, there's more products on TV than ever right now. There's more shows running consistently. I mean, every indie show I've done lately, the crowds are much larger than they were a year and a half prior. So I really think just the visibility of pro wrestling, the visibility of indie pro wrestling is at an all-time high, and I think that 2016 is going to see a huge upswing in professional wrestling, and I think that we're on that verge of that next big era.
Since you do a lot of independents these days, on the shows that you're at, do you find that the majority of the fans are more independent wrestling fans that follow the local independent scene, or do you see a majority of them that are fans of the national products and come out because they have access to the local independent scene, or do you see kind of a combination of that?
I think it's a combination. It also depends on the area you're in. I found that depending on what promotion it may be, you get a handful of guys that will say, "Oh, that's Michael Elgin from Ring of Honor," and a handful of guys who haven't been familiar with Ring of Honor or familiar with myself. But it's good for us to be out there because those fans that maybe don't know about other products out there rather than WWE or TNA sometimes. When we appear on shows like that, maybe they'll start looking into other products, you know. As I said, it really depends. Like I find, and this is not meant to group any cities or anything in any kind of groups, but really ultimately, bigger cities, it tends to be people that know Ring of Honor more so than a smaller town typically. And maybe that's just because bigger cities happen to get a Fox affiliate or something that we air on or whatever it may be. But, that's typically how I've kind of seen it.
When you do shows in the smaller towns, do you find it a little bit harder to connect with the audience since they may not have necessarily followed you from Ring of Honor? Does it take a little bit extra to get the crowd with you on those shows?
You know, and this is not meant to sound arrogant or cocky, but I haven't found that it's harder. Sometimes it's easy because I'm confident enough in my skill level to be able to get a crowd into what I'm doing, and when they don't have any expectations of me, I feel it's a lot easier. You know, there's always expectations, and expectations can be really tough in wrestling. Not just as, you know, somebody seeing you live for the first time or anything, but like when you're announced for a big matchup and like, oh, this guy against this guy, this is going to be a phenomenal match. Those expectations are just sometimes so difficult and kind of can hinder things. But I find it much easier, and it's kind of a more satisfying if I can get a crowd who's not familiar with me into what I'm doing rather than people who are very familiar with me getting into it.
One of the things on the independents that I've noticed for a long time is a lot of promotions do not put any effort into who they use in the auxiliary roles. Like, for example, ring announcer or referee, they'll use whoever they happen to have in the building in a given night. A great referee can actually save a bad match in a lot of situations, and a horrible referee can make a bad match much worse, and they can make a great match into a very bad match. Who are some of the referees that you've worked with recently on the independents or even for the bigger companies that you think need more recognition from promoters and they need to be doing more shows?
You know, I really have to just preach to the Ring of Honor ref at first, because I think the best compliment a referee can get is, I didn't realize you were there. Huh. And by saying that, they're not in the way. You're never like, oh shit, get out of my way. You're in this position. They're making the count. And that's the only time you realize that they're really in the match, is when somebody's shoulders on the mat, somebody's outside, they have to make a count out, they're breaking a hold. But other than that, they're never in your way. And that's one thing that's very phenomenal at Ring of Honor. And honestly, it's hard to pinpoint, because at this point, I can't remember the last time there was a ref where I was like, God damn it, this ref, he's not doing his job right. So maybe there's more referees who are training out there, just because really I can't remember the last time. And as you said, it's very important. You know, if they just have some kid who's been training wrestling and doesn't know much about refereeing and they throw them out there, those are the ones that are always in the way, not making counts. I don't remember the ref's name. I don't remember where it was, but I remember one match I was in years ago. It was his first time wrestling. I don't think he'd even been training wrestling, and he was watching the match and watching it as a fan in the ring as the referee. So like when you counted somebody, he didn't realize that he was supposed to get down and count, because he was watching it as if he was a fan in the crowd. Little things like that, it just takes away from wrestling big time. You know, I think that you hit the nail on the head with everything is crucial. You know, a ring announcer too can make a match seem more important if they're enthusiastic and they have the right pitches in their voice and just how they announce something. If someone's sitting there so monotone and this is blah, blah, blah against blah, 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 it just doesn't have that same feeling. You know, every part of a wrestling match is supposed to get a crowd excited. You know, that's why Bruce Buffer and Michael Buffer, you know, that's why they're such sought after announcers, because they just get you excited, because they have these catchphrases and their voice pitches and everything. They make something feel important, and that's part of wrestling. It has to seem important. And the ring announcer does that. A referee does that. Officials do that. Like, everything has to happen. And I think another part about referees in wrestling is wrestlers don't protect their referees. They shit all over them a lot. And I don't know if they don't realize how important a referee is. I don't know if it's poor training or what it is, but you gotta make that referee's count. You gotta make that referee's, he's supposed to be an official. He's supposed to have control of everything. And once he loses control, you're shitting all over him. And you never want the ref to take heat away from your match. I mean, if I'm not getting the most heat as a good guy or a bad guy in my match, and the referee's getting it all, I'm pissed off. So why would I put it on him?
Yeah, Michael, it's cue ball. I can tell you that, I use the analogy of this. If your favorite pro football team is playing and your quarterback runs out of bounds and the defense hits him with a late hit, ref runs up and grabs the flag but doesn't throw it, turns and walks away. At first you're pissed off at the guy that took the late hit, but when that ref doesn't throw the flag and turns to walk away, all the heat goes to him. You can't do that. The referee can get the heat so easy, and it starts with wrestlers being trained right and referees being trained right. Because in my promotion, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling League, I mean, you don't jaw jack or argue with the ref because he'll disqualify him, and that's just straight up. You don't cheat in front of him. And you know as well as I do that the really good heel heat comes from cheating where everybody can see it except the ref. You lose that heat if you do it right in front of them. So
it's funny you say that because when I do tag team matches at my school, and any of my students that do the blind tag behind the ref's back and then they switch, I get so angry because I said that's not where the heat comes from.
Right.
The heat comes from the referee's back to you guys. You guys both get in, double team the baby face. The legal guy gets back on the apron, referee turns around, then you make the tag in front of the referee because you already cheated.
Right.
You cheated behind him, and now you're being the dickhead that says, hey, ref, no, we're playing by the rules. We wouldn't cheat. And it's like people don't get that. That's how you get the heat. And it blows my mind, like, those little things.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's all little things. At my school, I teach the same thing. And as well as I do that tag team wrestling is different from a psychology standpoint, than singles wrestling is. And you have to teach that to kids because the last thing you want to do is one of your students gets stuck in a tag team and he makes everybody look like an idiot because he doesn't know how to do it. So, but you're exactly right. You use the ref, you cheat behind his back. Legal man still in the ring. As soon as he turns around, make the tag. He sees a clean tag. That way he doesn't get the heat. People aren't screaming at him to turn around and everything else. So, good kudos to you, man, because that's exactly true. And, you were talking about going to independent shows where they didn't really know you and making it a challenge to get the crowd behind your stuff. But, I've watched your career and I can tell you that one thing that I've noticed that you've learned is you've learned how to get over. So when you go to those independent shows, it's no different for you. You know how to get over. And you and I both know the only thing that really matters is that you get over. You know what I mean? That's it.
Yeah.
Each wrestler gets over. I mean, the baby gets over by getting sympathy, and then the heel can get over with his heat. But getting over is the only thing that matters. It isn't moves. It isn't cool 450 splashes. It's actually doing things the right way. So, you're teaching your kids the right way, man. And, that's a great thing because, for a long time there were these schools out there that would, and you went to one where once you could bump, they told you were ready to wrestle just because you could take a bump. Yep. And then,
Absolutely.
thank God you found somebody else because, you have a talented kid and he goes to school and all he wants to do is wrestle. So when that promoter or that owner of that school or whoever he is tells the kid 2 weeks later, you're ready, of course he's going to wrestle because he's excited about it. It's what he's always wanted to do since he's a kid. It's not his fault. But then to go that road, it can take a guy 10 years to figure it out with 2 weeks training, where if you go to another school, you get trained thoroughly, you got it all figured out, and you got to put it in that practical application, but you've been taught it over a course of a year and a half, and it's so much easier when that happens for guys. And, I tell guys all the time, hey, it's not your fault. You wanted to wrestle, went to a bad school, and guess what? They told you in 2 months you were ready to wrestle, and you believed them. You didn't know any better. And, you went out and you struggled. I have 2 guys in my school now that were out there for 3 years, and they got trained the same way, and they got less bookings the more they wrestled.
Yeah.
Instead of the other way around, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me flip it back to Side Guy real quick, and then we'll get Zane to let you give some plugs, and we'll let you get out of here, buddy.
Sounds good.
All right, the last question I would have is I know that you're headed to Japan this week, and New Japan's really taken off in the last couple of years with American fans. What do you think that they're going to be able to do to expand the fan base here in the United States and grow their company, much like WWE has grown in Japan and can tour over there?
I think them on Access TV is a good start. I think that the New Japan World's a good start, and the relationship with Ring of Honor. They're getting more visible in North America. I think that there was talk of them opening up an English version of New Japan World because over half their subscriptions were from Americans. So I think they really have a strong following. I think it will just take getting to the point where they can run a full show without it being like a joint show. I think that's something they could do and would succeed at. And I think that's what they could build to, and that would just open up a whole new area of fans, I think. But as Ring of Honor grows and the relationship grows, I think the more the New Japan stars are seen on Ring of Honor pay-per-view and Ring of Honor TV, I think that product will be sought out because honestly, man, we all say that Ring of Honor has some of the best wrestlers in the world, and don't get me wrong, they do, but New Japan is on the same level, if not a touch ahead. Those guys are just so good. They know who they are. They know what they do, and they're just so professional and so amazing that I really think that everybody who's a wrestling fan, no matter what wrestling product you watch, Ring of Honor, TNA, WWE, anything, if you're into old NWA or if you're just sitting at home and watching, some Smoky Mountain or something, whatever it may be, if you watch New Japan, you'll become a fan because I think it's the best of all eras of professional wrestling. I really do, I just think it's some of the most amazing wrestling out there, and I think anybody who calls himself a wrestling fan would be doing themselves a great disservice if they haven't checked out New Japan.
Well, I'm going to pass things over to the co-host of this program, the bearded wonder, Zane Paisley.
Once again, Unbreakable Michael Elgin, the former and hopefully future Ring of Honor World Champion, is on the Angry Marks Podcast Network on the Undisputed Wrestling Show. I know our time is very short with you right now, Mike. We really appreciate you coming on. I just want to briefly touch on New Japan Pro Wrestling. You just competed in the G1 Climax tournament. You did a great job over there. Was that your first time really traveling to Japan and spending a lot of time there?
Yeah, the first time going to Japan was the G1. It had been a goal of mine for many years and something that, I was really actively seeking, and I was just happy that I went there, and it was everything I dreamed of, even better. I've said it a couple times now, but if I had the opportunity to move there and wrestle exclusively there, I would definitely do it for a couple of years at least. The culture, the food, the wrestling, the fans, everything about Japan is amazing. And, man, as a wrestling fan or a wrestler, it's something you have to experience. It's just phenomenal.
Well, obviously they liked you so much that they invited you back for the World Tag League, and you had a great showing there as well. Big event coming up, Wrestle Kingdom 10 on January 4th, and you had mentioned how our listeners can get that through New Japan's streaming service. You are actually fighting for the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Championship against Jay Lethal. Obviously want to wish you the best of luck in that match. You will be appearing here in Indianapolis, where I live, on January 15th for Ring of Honor, and conspicuous by his absence on the flyer, Jay Lethal's nowhere on that flyer. So I'm hoping that you get to win the championship there in Japan and then be able to bring it here to Indianapolis.
Well, let's hope. That's definitely the goal. It's definitely a huge stage. And I think maybe I'm hoping that it's safe to say that Tokyo Dome will be thoroughly behind me on Monday. So I'm looking forward to the match, and I think that people are going to be blown away by the performance of not just me, but Jay Lethal, of course. And let's just hope that it goes down in the record books.
Well, and the week prior, or the week after Wrestle Kingdom, you're going to be at IWA Mid-South. You're making your return to IWA Mid-South. taking on a big guy named Russ Jones. Are you familiar with him?
I'm a little bit familiar with him. I've seen him around over the years.
I'm sure that's going to be an amazing match, and really looking forward to seeing you down there in the Louisville area in Clarksville, Indiana. I just wanted to let you have a little bit of time to plug. I know that you've got a Pro Wrestling Tees store. Can you talk a little about that, how our listeners can check out your shirts on there, and also let our listeners know your social media?
Yeah, first I'll start with the social media because it'll be easier this way.
Okay.
At Michael Elgin 25. You see me there as Big Mike. So if you follow me on Twitter, right in my bio, there's a link to my Pro Wrestling Tees store, which is Pro Wrestling Tees / Michael Elgin. But it's much easier, just if you're on Twitter, if you see me and follow me, and then click on the link, go over. I think there's about 8 or 9 designs up right now, and I'm always, thinking of new things to put up there. So hopefully I'll get some more up soon. And I definitely appreciate the support, whether it be a follow on Twitter. Check out my YouTube page. I have some good stuff up, or some good stuff up there as well. You can check that out at Michael Elgin, or check my email on there is elginbookings@gmail.com, or it'll come right up. Man, just support me on Twitter. Support wrestling as a whole. That's all really we can ask. I wouldn't be lucky enough to make a living if there wasn't such amazing fans out there that supported pro wrestling. So if you continue to support pro wrestling, I can continue to do it. And I love doing it. I love being in front of an audience. I love being in front of great wrestling fans. So really, whether you like me, you hate me or not, go to your local shows, watch TV, whatever product you can find, buy DVDs, whatever it may be, just support wrestling.
Well, I just have one more question for you. Have you gotten a Ribera Steakhouse jacket yet?
Yes, I got a Road Warriors Gym special jacket, and it's fantastic.
Oh, that is fantastic. If you have a chance to pack it and bring it here to Indianapolis, I'd love to take a photo with you in the Ribera jacket.
Sounds good. I will try to do so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We know you're very busy. You've got bookings all this week, and then heading out to Japan. Happy New Year to you. Q-Ball, did you have anything that you need to wrap up with him?
No, I just want to tell Michael congratulations for being on one of the biggest shows in history with a 10-year record of getting bigger each year, and no pressure. I'm sure you're going to go out there and perform and have a great match with Jay Lethal, who I'm also a big fan of, and I can't wait to see it. And you're just hitting your stride. You'll be 30 this year, right?
I'll be 30 December of next year.
So you just turned 29. You're in full stride. Yeah. You're wrestling in Japan on the biggest show they have, one of the biggest shows in the world. I just want to wish you continued success. I'll hit you up on Facebook once in a while and check in with you. Thanks for being on the show. And I'm telling you, you're a tremendous ambassador for professional wrestling, and we could use 1,000 more guys like you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the kind words, and Happy New Year to you guys, and take care.
Be safe, brother.
Bye.
He answered my next question right before I could ask it. I was going to ask him if he had the opportunity, if he would wrestle in Japan full time. And he said, right before I was going to ask that, he said, yeah, if I ever have the opportunity, I'd love to live there for a couple years and wrestle there full time. So I thought that was pretty awesome. I know he got over huge in that G1 climax. I wasn't expecting that much, just because, as Sign Guy had mentioned earlier, his ROH World Championship run didn't go as well as they had hoped for. And so when he went over to G1, I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. And he killed it over there. It's a resurgence for him. And this Wrestle Kingdom is just going to be the next step in making him a huge star here in the States and in Japan.